This is the beautiful story of an American man in his 30s who, while traveling in Sweden, falls in love with a blonde beauty he meets by chance in a rural village and starts a family with her. There was a 32-year-old American man named Ethan Carter. He had an extraordinary passion for exploring new places. Since his college days, he had enjoyed backpacking around the world, experiencing the landscapes and cultures of each country firsthand and documenting them. Then, one day, while living a quiet life as a graphic designer in Chicago, the words Northern Europe struck a deep chord within him. Sweden, a land I've never been to. What would it be like there? It wasn't that he had harbored a long-standing admiration for Northern Europe. Nevertheless, just the thought of Sweden made his heart pound. White snowfields, fir forests, calm lakes, and clean air, just imagining it all felt purifying to his soul. Coincidentally, he had saved up enough money and was in a situation where he could take a vacation freely. He bravely booked a plane ticket and headed for Sweden with no concrete plan. After landing in Stockholm, Ethan briefly toured the famous sites before preparing to head straight for the northern regions. While many travelers visit big cities like Stockholm, Gothenburg, or Malmö and nearby attractions, Ethan was drawn by a vague idea that the true scenery of Northern Europe would be found in the remote villages of the north. So he alternated between trains and buses, heading towards deep forest villages where people were few and far between. The journey was more arduous than he had expected. As he ventured into central and northern Sweden, the temperature dropped sharply and a winter rain began to fall, making road conditions poor. The bus arrival times were also unpredictable. It wasn't easy. Still, with his characteristic tenacity, Ethan overcame each obstacle one by one. He spent a night on a bench in a small train station and even hitched a ride with a local. With every new scene he encountered, he savored the heart-pounding thrill pressing his camera's shutter. After several days, when he finally arrived at a small village nestled deep in the forest, Ethan was overwhelmed by the surrounding landscape. The cold, crisp air flowing between the trees, the snow blanketing the few houses, and the occasional burst of sunlight that sparkled brilliantly. It made him wonder if he had stepped into a fairy tale village. There was a small sign at the village entrance, but when Ethan checked his map, even Google Maps didn't display its name properly. As dusk was falling, he wasn't even sure if there was any lodging in the village. I might end up sleeping on the street at this rate, he thought to himself as he walked aimlessly towards the edge of the village. It was then that a red wooden house behind a low fence caught his eye. The house, likely painted with the traditional Swedish falu red, glowed with a warm orange light. Ethan gathered his courage and knocked on the door. When the door opened, a young blonde-haired woman appeared. She had fair, almost translucent skin, deep blue eyes, and a slender, striking jawline. "Hi," she said, looking slightly surprised as she stood in the doorway, gazing at the unfamiliar man. With a shy smile, Ethan spoke carefully. "Hello, I'm a traveler from the United States. Is there a place to stay in this village?" She blinked for a moment, then replied in English with a thick accent. "There aren't any real hotels or guest houses around here. They often close down entirely in the winter. How did you end up here so late?" Ethan briefly explained how he had aimlessly traveled north and drifted into the village, mentioning that he had missed his connecting bus, and with no immediate return transportation, he was stranded. She looked troubled, tilting her head as she asked, "So you have nowhere to stay right now? What are you going to do?" When Ethan waved his hands in the air and asked if she could recommend any B&B-style lodging, she looked hesitant. She explained that with so few residents, traditional accommodations were virtually non-existent. Finally, she shrugged and said, "I do have a spare room in my house. It's very small, but would you be okay with that?" It was an unexpected offer. Letting a complete stranger into one's home was no small decision, but it seemed she simply couldn't bear the thought of leaving him out in the cold. Ethan, though, flustered, had no other choice. Spending the night outdoors in the sub-zero temperatures was not an option. He nodded eagerly. "Oh, thank you so much. I'll be careful not to be a bother. I'll just stay for one night and figure something out in the morning." And so, Ethan entered the blonde woman's house. As he took off his shoes and stepped into the living room, the heat from the warm fireplace thawed his body. In one corner of the room was a small sofa and a table, and the walls were adorned with Nordic-style picture frames and shelves. Through the window, the night sky and the faint outlines of coniferous trees were visible under the pale moonlight. "My name is Linda," she said, adding more logs to the fire. Ethan replied, "I'm Ethan Carter. You can just call me Ethan." "Ethan," Linda smiled. "That's a nice name." After their brief introductions, Linda led Ethan to a small room. Inside was a simple bed and a desk. It seemed to have been used as a storage or guest room. "Please excuse the mess, I cleaned it up in a hurry. This is the only room I have right now." She looked apologetic, but Ethan was nothing but grateful. Thus, the two's chance encounter began by the fireplace in the middle of the night. The next morning, Ethan woke to the morning sunlight. The gentle scent of coffee prepared by Linda tickled his nose. He could hear birds chirping somewhere. True to a Swedish forest village, the crisp, cold air seeped in slightly through the window cracks. He quickly got dressed and went out to the living room. Linda had set out bread, cheese, and jam on a small dining table. "Did you sleep well? It's just bread, so it's simple, but it should be enough to tide you over." "This is great. I actually love bread." They cautiously conversed. When Linda asked again about what he had vaguely mentioned the night before, why he was traveling north, and how long he planned to stay, Ethan explained that his hobby was taking pictures and writing about his travels on a blog. He also gave a brief introduction to his home country, America. "I've heard of it, of course, but I only know what I see in movies. Hollywood, New York. That's about it," Linda said with a slightly shy smile, taking a bite of her bread. Ethan briefly explained life in Chicago, the music, and the vastness of the country, though it was unclear if Linda was genuinely interested or just had a vague curiosity about foreign cultures. After the meal, Ethan said, "I'll look around the village today and try to figure out a way to my next destination," and asked how he should pay for his stay. But Linda waved her hand dismissively, saying there was no need to pay. "This village is so quiet, we rarely get outsiders. Since you're here, just stay comfortably." However, she added that while tonight was fine if he planned to stay longer, he would have to find another solution. Ethan slung his light backpack over his shoulder and began to walk through the snow-covered village as if exploring. Quiet houses were scattered here and there, and with a few farms and a small combined shop, the population seemed to be only a few dozen people. Most people greeted the unfamiliar man with curious expressions, saying, "Hej." Ethan would reply briefly and ask when the next bus might arrive, but the answer was always that the bus only came once or twice a week, and no one knew the exact schedule. Wandering the streets. Ethan felt a little flustered, but he consoled himself by thinking that this unpredictability was part of the fun of traveling. Then, a desire suddenly grew within him. Since things had turned out this way, he wanted to stay a bit longer and fully capture the forests, lakes, and the nature near the Arctic. That evening, Ethan returned to Linda's house. The warm scent of stew filled the entire home. Linda had made a simple stew with lamb, and when Ethan walked in, she asked, "How was your day?" and invited him to eat. "I was going to eat this myself, but I made too much for one person. Would you like to join me?" "I'd be grateful if you did. Should I at least pay for the ingredients?" "It's fine. Things like this are for sharing." Linda gave an awkward smile and gestured for him to sit at the table. The warm aroma of the stew and the soft texture of the lamb quickly satisfied Ethan's hunger. As they ate, they naturally talked about their day and what they had seen. Linda mentioned that she worked part-time at the only shop in the village and cared for a few livestock on her own. When Ethan asked if she had ever thought of moving to a bigger city, she replied, I don't really like living in the city. I have no family, and I'm comfortable here. For some reason, Ethan felt that she might be living a lonely life. With her blonde hair and blue eyes, she was a classic Nordic beauty, but there was a hint of melancholy in her smile. After dinner, Ethan hesitated before carefully asking Linda, "If it's okay, could I possibly stay for a few more days? I'd like to see a bit more of this village." He added that he would of course pay for the room or living expenses. With almost no other lodging in the village, he couldn't easily stay without Linda's help. Linda paused for a moment, then said, "All right, but I'm usually busy, so you'll have to help with some chores and errands. Also, I value my privacy, so please don't go anywhere besides your room and the living room." Ethan readily agreed. In this way, a formal B&B-like arrangement was made. And so Ethan decided to stay in the village for over a week. During the day, he would walk through the nearby forests taking pictures and visit a small lake to capture the rising mist on his camera. Sometimes he would follow Linda to the shop and help carry goods. In the evenings, they would sit by the fireplace, eat together, and share stories about their lives. Linda would often teach him Swedish phrases, and Ethan would explain American culture, making them both laugh. At night, he slept in his small room, wrapped in a sleeping bag to escape the cold air. But sometimes he would come out to the living room and gaze out the window, wondering, when will I ever get to see the aurora? He knew that the aurora could be seen in northern Sweden, especially near the Arctic Circle during winter, but he had no idea of the village's exact location. Still, he held on to the hope that if he stayed a little longer, he might witness a once-in-a-lifetime scene. Meanwhile, Ethan and Linda got to know each other a little better. For example, Linda shared that both her parents had passed away when she was young, and with no relatives or siblings, she had grown up alone. She had been raised on state support and had settled in this village about 5 years ago. She didn't particularly enjoy socializing, found city life uncomfortable, and preferred living alone in this quiet place. Ethan also shared a bit about his family. He had grown up in an ordinary family in Chicago and was traveling with the money he had saved from his job. "My family probably has no idea I've come this far. I plan to show them my travel journal when I go back," he said. Linda seemed interested and a little envious. As life in the village settled into a routine, Ethan and Linda's curiosity about each other deepened. In the evenings, they would sit by the fireplace, or they would talk about the forest and lake scenery while looking at the photos he had taken that day. "I saw this bird today. I don't think we have it in the States," he'd say, and Linda would reply, "Oh, that's a bird that only lives in this region." One day, Linda made a traditional Swedish dish similar to pancakes. It was a sweet treat, eaten with jam or fruit, and Ethan's face lit up. "Wow, these are kind of like thin American pancakes or crepes," he said with a bright smile. Delighted by his reaction, Linda playfully suggested, "Next time you should make me some American food." Ethan readily promised, "Sure, I can try making something simple like a good chili." A strange sense of comfort settled between them. It was still too awkward to call themselves a couple, but it certainly didn't feel like a simple roommate relationship either. As the nights grew deeper, they were becoming so close that a warmth could be felt between them, even without a single word. Then, one snowy night, Ethan was sitting on a small camping chair in a corner of the yard. He was looking up at the incredibly clear, star-filled sky, holding onto a small hope that he might see the aurora. Just then, Linda quietly approached and sat down beside him. "You're out here in the cold even at this hour. You're something else." Linda draped a small blanket over Ethan's shoulders. Ethan thanked her and said he was hoping the aurora might appear. Linda nodded and looked up at the sky with him. "The aurora. It's not easy to see even from here. The conditions have to be just right, but if you're lucky, you might see it." They gazed at the stars in silence for a while. Every time their eyes met, an unexplainable tremor passed between them. Linda smiled faintly and said, The chili you made today was really delicious. It was hearty, but the flavor and aroma were strangely addictive. Ethan laughed again. That's because you prepared the ingredients so well. As they exchanged shy smiles over small compliments, Linda suddenly asked in a cautious voice, "Did you have a lot of dating experience back home? I was wondering if there was some story behind you coming all this way." Ethan was at a loss for words for a moment, then answered honestly, "No special story, really. I just haven't thought about marriage yet. There was someone I liked, but it didn't work out. That's why I'm traveling so freely." Linda nodded. "I had a boyfriend once, but that was a long time ago. It was when I lived in the city, but we broke up because we weren't a good match. And with no family, I moved to this village and naturally grew distant from dating." A hint of loneliness settled in her eyes. "Aren't you lonely?" Ethan dared to ask. Linda forced a smile. "I've gotten used to it. It gets lonely sometimes, but it's more comfortable than forcing myself to be among people in the city." Linda's words reminded Ethan of the bustling life and exhaustion he had once experienced in Chicago. It seemed that no matter where you were in the world, everyone carried their own solitude. That night, the two of them watched the stars like old friends sharing small stories. A mutual attraction was slowly but surely blossoming in their hearts. A few more days passed, and Ethan had been staying there for over 2 weeks. He could have taken a bus to another region, but he had fallen completely in love with the village's winter scenery, and the time he spent with Linda felt so natural and enjoyable. A thought flickered in his mind. Is it really okay for me to stay here like this? But he pushed away any major worries and enjoyed each day as it came. Then one day, an unexpected crisis struck. Ethan had ventured deep into a forest path to take photos and got lost. He had walked farther than usual, and on his way back, a heavy snow began to fall, obscuring his vision, and even his GPS became unreliable. His phone had no signal. In the short winter daylight, dusk was already setting in, and Ethan grew anxious. "If I get caught in a deeper blizzard at night, I'll be in big trouble," he thought. But he remained calm and tried to find his way by retracing his footsteps. After wandering around for 2 or 3 hours, he thankfully saw a faint light. It was the path leading back to Linda's village. Overwhelmed by fatigue and hunger, Ethan stumbled back, barely reaching the edge of the village. As soon as he opened the door to Linda's house, she rushed over with a startled look on her face. "Ethan, where have you been? Do you have any idea how worried I was when you didn't come back after sunset?" Panting, Ethan managed to say, "I got lost. My phone wasn't working. I'm sorry." Linda let out a sigh of relief, then her voice rose in anger. "That was so dangerous. Do you know how treacherous these woods are? Tourists go missing here sometimes." With tears welling in her eyes, she poured out the anxiety she had been feeling. She had been asking the villagers, and had been at her wits' end all day when he didn't return. With an embarrassed expression, Ethan sincerely apologized. "I'm so sorry. That was reckless of me." Linda scolded him repeatedly not to do anything so foolish again, but in the end, she pulled him into a tight hug. That night, Linda held on to Ethan as if she had found a lost family member, not letting him go for a long time. Ethan, too, felt a strange warmth knowing there was someone who cared about him so much. They felt each other's warmth and breath, cherishing the preciousness of his safe return from danger. After this incident, Linda urged Ethan, "This forest is much more dangerous than you think. Don't go far by yourself." Ethan, genuinely repentant, promised to be more careful. Ironically, this small conflict and crisis brought the two of them closer. A few days later, while Ethan was helping with chores, he and Linda sat down for tea. He added new logs to the fireplace, and they looked at each other's faces in the flickering light. Ethan gathered his thoughts, his heart trembling slightly. "I can't put this off any longer. I have to tell her how I really feel. Linda, spending this time with you has made me feel emotions I never knew I had." As he began to speak, Linda tilted her head. What kind of emotions? Feeling his face flush, Ethan confessed honestly. I've grown to like you very much. It's a feeling beyond gratitude or simple fondness. I don't know how to explain it, but you feel truly special to me. Linda seemed to freeze for a moment, but then a pinkish hue spread across her face. Her eyes wavered as she asked, Really? Ethan summoned a little more courage. Yes, the reason I've stayed here for so long wasn't just because of the scenery. When I'm with you, I feel strangely at ease and excited. Linda took a shaky breath and gently took Ethan's hand. Her hand was warm and delicate. I've also come to see you as special. At first, I was just helping you, but I started to enjoy our time together more and more. I never thought I'd feel this way. Finishing her sentence, Linda suddenly leaned towards Ethan. The moment their eyes met, Ethan's heart felt like it would explode. And then Linda's lips met his. The barriers of different cultures and languages had long since crumbled. That moment was as quiet as the midnight snow and as warm as the crackling fire. After a long embrace and a short kiss, neither of them knew what more to say. They simply held each other, watching their shadows flicker in the firelight. It felt as if every moment he had spent with Linda since coming to this village had beautifully connected. After confirming their love, their daily life became much more affectionate. They would greet each other first thing in the morning and exchange smiles during small, everyday moments. Linda was busy with her shop job and farm management, but she always tried to make time to have lunch with Ethan. Ethan, in turn, actively helped her out. In the evenings, they would prepare dinner together and watch TV snuggled tightly on the cozy sofa. They created their own special time watching Nordic dramas and movies. Sometimes they would drink fruit wine, turn off the lights, light a candle, and talk for hours while looking into each other's eyes. Linda began to open up more about her past. Her parents had passed away early, and she had grown apart from her relatives, having to grow up on her own. She had failed repeatedly while trying to find work in the city and had been hurt in relationships. I found it hard to be with people, she confessed, especially because I'm not good at expressing my emotions. Ethan comforted her, saying, But a warm person like you would surely meet good people. Reassured by his words, Linda showed tears for the first time. Thank you for understanding me. Ethan gently held her. Day by day, their love grew. Even if they had occasional arguments, they would quickly make up by holding hands. And then, one day, a beautiful night with the aurora finally arrived. A green wave unfolded across the snowy landscape. The two stood in the yard holding hands and watched the fantastical dance of light stretch across the entire sky. An aurora this clear is something you only see once every few months, Linda said in an awestruck voice. Ethan smiled happily. I'm so glad I didn't leave and got to share this moment with you. Linda squeezed his hand and replied, Me too. The aurora painted the night sky as if blessing their future. After seeing the aurora together, the two of them became more than just lovers. They were cohabitants. It was no longer a temporary stay or a B&B arrangement, but a life of relying on each other in one house. They would exchange good morning kisses, go grocery shopping together, clean, and repair the house together, sharing small joys and small hardships. Naturally, conflicts arose in the process. Ethan, with his American eating habits, often wanted a classic BBQ flavor or spicy hot sauce on his food, and Linda wasn't entirely used to the strong smells. Conversely, Ethan sometimes struggled with the pickled fish dishes Linda enjoyed, but they found small compromises, gradually understanding each other's food and adjusting their palates. The problem was Ethan's visa and length of stay. He had come to Sweden on a tourist visa, but had already overstayed significantly. To remain in Sweden, he needed to acquire legal residency, but there was no concrete plan yet. Linda said, If you want, I can look into ways I can help." And Ethan replied, "For now, let's continue like this, and I'll have to think about returning to the States for a bit." Both felt it was too soon to talk about marriage. Nevertheless, their relationship deepened. One night, they expressed their love for each other passionately, growing even closer. The trips between Linda's room and Ethan's room became more frequent, and eventually, Ethan started spending his nights in Linda's bed instead of his sleeping bag. While a blizzard raged outside, the inside of the house was filled with warmth and passion. A few months had passed since they started living together. One day, Linda suddenly complained of feeling unwell from the morning. The nausea and dizziness were so severe that she took the day off from the shop and rested at home. Ethan took care of her, suggesting, "Shouldn't you see a doctor?" There was no proper clinic in the village. The nearest major hospital was a 3 to 4 hour drive away. Linda first went to a small health post on the outskirts of the village for a simple test. A few days later, the test results came back, and to their shock, the diagnosis was pregnancy. Even the doctor seemed a bit surprised, and Linda was at a complete loss. "I'm having a baby. What should I do?" she asked, returning home in a state of confusion to tell Ethan the news. Ethan, too, was speechless with shock. They hadn't promised to marry, and their cultural differences and uncertain future made the situation daunting. But soon a strange joy welled up in a corner of his heart. Ethan took Linda's hand and said seriously, "Linda, this is an incredible thing that has happened to us. It's bewildering, but I want to take responsibility. This is our child, Linda." Her eyes, welling with tears, hugged Ethan. "I want to trust you too, but honestly I'm scared. I've never had a family before." Ethan replied firmly, "Let's work on this together. We can create the best environment for our child." That night, they sat by the fireplace and imagined their child's future. Would the baby grow up in the Swedish forest? Would there be a chance to go to the United States? What languages would they learn? Worries came first, but on the other hand, their hearts swelled with hope. As time passed, Linda's belly began to show. Ethan did his best to make her as comfortable as possible, taking on both household chores and outside work. The villagers also heard the news and offered their help. "Congratulations, let us know if you need baby clothes," were among the warm words they received. The old woman who owned the shop said, "It's been a long time since we've seen such joy," and often gave Linda and Ethan food. There were difficulties too. Linda suffered from severe morning sickness, often missing meals, and her stamina dropped, making the round trips to the hospital a challenge. Ethan bought a car and drove her to the hospital in the city once or twice a month. The medical staff advised them to be especially careful since it was her first child, and her diet and environment were unfamiliar. Fortunately, the pregnancy continued without any major complications. As more time passed, Linda, with her now large belly, felt uncomfortable, but would often talk to the baby inside her. Ethan would join her, placing his hand on her abdomen and whispering, "Our baby, please be born healthy. Mom and Dad are waiting for you." The two of them had found a new purpose in life. Finally, the day the contractions started arrived. Linda was in pain all night, and Ethan rushed her to the hospital. The winter roads in the northern region were dangerous, but with the help of the villagers, they arrived safely. After a long labor, a lovely daughter was born. Linda cried as she held the baby, and Ethan's eyes turned red. The tiny life new to the world announced its presence with a cry. After that time passed, and they became an official married couple. They didn't have a lavish wedding, but held a small celebration with the villagers. They invited a pastor for a simple vow exchange, followed by a modest party with singing and dancing. Linda wore a white dress, and Ethan wore a neat suit, and they promised to be together forever. Linda, who had never known the meaning of family, started a new life with Ethan and their child. And in the midst of it all, their second daughter was born. The arrival of a new baby when their first was just starting to walk made life even busier, but the two of them gradually built their lives, growing into the structure of a family. They installed a small swing and slide in the front yard for their firstborn to play on, and as soon as their second baby started crawling, the house became boisterously loud. Ethan worked hard taking temporary jobs around the village for his wife and two daughters. Time flew by as they raised their two daughters. The children grew up quickly and marvelously. The first daughter, mixing clumsy English and Swedish, would call for her mom and dad, exploring the world with curious eyes. The second daughter followed her older sister, crawling around the room and playing with toys. Linda was sometimes so exhausted she felt like collapsing, but the joy of raising them with Ethan was greater. One winter, the village experienced a series of exceptionally clear and cold days. Hearing a forecast that the aurora would be strong that night, Ethan bundled up Linda and the children warmly and drove them in the car. The sky was more open on a hill behind the village. They prepared multiple layers of winter jackets and blankets to protect the children as they waited. Before long, a green curve stretched across the sky. "Wow!" Their first daughter pointed at the sky, laughing in wonder. The second, held in her father's arms, was still clumsy with words, but made ah sounds towards the light. Linda smiled, but tears welled in her eyes. To think that the four of us are watching the aurora together like this, it truly feels like a dream. Ethan hugged. Linda looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, my love. Meeting you here was the greatest fortune of my life. I couldn't ask for more with our children growing up so healthy." Linda replied with a sincere smile. "Me too. I never imagined I could live so happily in this small village." Under the aurora-lit night sky, the couple's difficult pasts and uncertain futures vanished. They gazed at each other within the sturdy fence of family. In that moment, even the children, as if to commemorate the scene, grabbed their parents' clothes and smiled beautifully. About another year passed. The two daughters grew day by day. The first started attending something similar to a preschool, and the second's speech improved, calling Mama and Dada more clearly. The couple lived a joyful and busy life, no different from any other family. Ethan helped with farm work and organized his writings and photos for his blog. Linda went back to work at the shop and took care of the children at home. Then, one morning, Linda made a surprising confession to Ethan. "Ethan, I think I'm pregnant with our third." Ethan was startled, but couldn't help but smile. A third child after 2 pregnancies and births was unexpected but happy news. "I'm not sure yet. I need to go to the hospital, but I have a feeling," Linda said cautiously. A few days later, a hospital checkup confirmed she was indeed pregnant. Although Linda had been through 2 pregnancies, she still felt a mix of anxiety. Ethan reassured her. "Now with a third, we're really going to be a big family. What if it's a boy this time?" he joked. In truth, Ethan didn't care about the gender, but he suddenly thought it would be fun to have a son. Linda laughed. "Then it would be 2 daughters and 1 son. Isn't that a bit of a cliché?" With excitement, they began to prepare for the new life. They wondered how their first and second daughters would react to a younger sibling, bought a new crib, and started rearranging the rooms and childcare environment. The village neighbors heard the news and offered encouragement. "A third one already. Congratulations. Let us know if you need anything." As Linda's belly grew, she continued to balance work at the shop and home, but Ethan became more actively involved. He took the eldest to preschool and went for walks with the second, shouldering a greater sense of responsibility. He thought to himself that he never dreamed his life would change this much, from being alone in a remote Swedish village to being responsible for a family that would soon have 5 members. Entering the mid-stage of her third pregnancy, Linda often struggled with the weight of her body. Taking care of two daughters was sometimes overwhelming, and with Ethan busy with farm work or temporary jobs, small arguments occasionally broke out between them. For instance, conflicts arose over the division of childcare and housework, like who would bathe the children or who would cook and do the dishes. Once Linda got angry, saying, "I'm pregnant and you're always out," Ethan felt wronged and replied, "We need to earn money to live, you know that." "I know that," Linda said, her eyes welling with tears. "But I'm upset because I feel like you haven't been paying as much attention to me and the kids lately." Only then did Ethan realize he had been neglecting his family under the excuse of being busy, and he apologized to his wife. "I'm sorry. I'll try to make more time. Your health is the priority, so don't overdo it." Though Linda said she was fine, she was actually accumulating stress. At night, they had a frank conversation. Realistic questions came up like, "Is it right for us to settle down in this village permanently?" And, "Is your visa and citizenship issue completely resolved?" Ethan had prepared various documents to legally reside in Sweden, and with their marriage and children registered there were almost no problems, but a concrete plan was still lacking. "When our children get older, we'll have to think about school and education." Linda worried. Ethan nodded. "Let's put our heads together and solve it one by one." Despite the conflicts and worries, they ended up embracing each other again, vowing that they could get through anything as long as they were together. Feeling the baby move inside her womb, they could dream of a better future no matter how hard things got. Then the long northern winter ended, and spring arrived. Of course, spring in this village was still chilly compared to other regions, but the snow began to melt and small buds started to appear here and there. As the days grew longer, the children played and tumbled in the yard. The first daughter would ask with curiosity, "Mommy, why is your tummy so big?" And the second would try to feel the baby in the womb with her hand. Linda's belly was so big that even moving was becoming difficult, but the children's cute interest made her happy every day. Ethan took photos of the budding forest and participated in a spring festival-like event with the villagers. In the evenings, the couple would sit at a simple table, light a candle, and talk about the future. "Like you said, maybe we should consider moving to a slightly bigger city for the kids' education later on," Ethan said. Linda nodded. "Yes, they should have more opportunities when they get older. But we don't have to leave this village completely. It would be nice if we could find a balance." Ethan gently held Linda's hand and said, "What you and the kids want is most important. Let's all think about it together." In the final stages of pregnancy, Linda would get out of breath with the slightest movement and suffered from severe back pain. The hospital warned that this time might be a little harder. Even with 2 previous births, the third was by no means easy. At home, they always had an emergency bag ready, not knowing when labor might start. Ethan often stayed up at night anticipating a sudden onset of contractions. With 2 young children, they also needed someone to look after them. A village friend and neighbor volunteered to take care of the kids during the birth. Ethan and Linda felt relieved, reassuring themselves, "No matter what happens, we're prepared." But the actual situation often defies prediction. One afternoon, while Linda was putting their second child to sleep, contractions suddenly started. Ethan was there, but he was busy comforting their first daughter, who had just fallen and hurt her knee. From the living room, Linda, clutching her belly with a pained expression, cried out, "We have to go to the hospital now." Ethan quickly called a neighbor to look after their daughters. Then he put Linda in the car and sped to the hospital. The road conditions were not bad, but Linda's contractions were getting closer together, and she cried out in pain. "It hurts so much." Ethan tried to comfort her. "Just hold on a little longer, we're almost there," and drove as fast as he could. As soon as they arrived at the hospital, doctors and nurses rushed out and moved Linda to the delivery room. Ethan stayed by her side, his heart pounding with anxiety. Even in her pain, Linda held Ethan's hand tightly, murmuring, "Please let me deliver our baby safely." Ethan swallowed his tears and soothed her. "I'm right here. Don't worry." The delivery took longer than expected. Linda was exhausted, drenched in sweat, and the doctor encouraged her, "Just a little more. You're almost there." Ethan's heart was filled with a desperate plea for both his wife and child to be healthy. Time passed slowly, but finally, the baby saw the light of day. A loud cry filled the delivery room. A nurse held up the baby and said with a bright face, "Congratulations, it's a boy." Linda, though exhausted, shed tears and her lips trembled. "It's really a boy." Ethan's chest swelled with emotion. "We really have a son." He had said that gender didn't matter since they already had 2 daughters, but hearing it was a boy brought a unique kind of emotion. The doctor said, "Both mother and baby are healthy." Linda, her face stained with tears, held her newborn son's tiny hand. Ethan also bent down gently, stroking the baby's cheek with a smile. "Welcome. You're part of our family now." A few days later, Linda and the baby were safely discharged and returned home. At home, their first and second daughters ran around excited. "Mommy's home. There's a baby." The small house was now filled with a family of 5. The sound of a baby crying echoed through the house, and Ethan was busy buying diapers and formula. Linda was recovering in bed, but she smiled as her daughters came to see the baby, asking, "Is this my little brother?" "He's your little brother," Ethan said, having a small conversation with his daughters. "What should we name him?" The young girls simply called him Baby, full of curiosity. The thought of the commotion 3 children would create under one roof was a bit overwhelming, but Ethan and Linda believed that the know-how they had gained from raising 2 daughters would make raising the third a little easier. Most importantly, they now had a strong sense of camaraderie and family love. A conviction had grown that they could overcome any obstacle together. A few months after becoming a family of 5, winter returned to the Swedish forest village. Ethan had prepared in advance to keep his wife and children warm. He stacked more firewood for heating reinforced insulation around the house and made sure there were plenty of clothes and toys for the children. The second daughter was learning more words, and the first was learning simple Swedish sentences at preschool. The son still spent most of his time sleeping soundly in his swaddle, but sometimes when he opened his eyes, he would wave his tiny hand at his parents. Linda and Ethan would watch their children, and whenever their eyes met, they would smile. One night, the aurora appeared in the sky again. This time, Ethan saw it first and called out, "Honey, come outside." The children were all asleep, but Linda briefly entrusted the baby to a neighbor and went out into the yard with Ethan. A brilliant green aurora spread across the night sky like a curtain. "To see the aurora again. It's so beautiful." Linda breathed in awe. Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist and whispered, "We've been living like this for over 3 years now. I never imagined I'd meet you, have 3 children, and live like this." Linda nodded. "I used to think I was fine on my own, but now, I don't think I could live without you and the children." Ethan bent down and lightly kissed Linda's forehead. "Thank you for trusting me and for giving me such healthy children. I'm truly grateful every single day." Linda replied in a small voice, "I'm the one who's grateful, for not leaving me alone and for becoming my family." The aurora continued to flow slowly across the sky. It was a scene as if the blessings of the entire world were enveloping the 2 of them. Standing together in the snowfield, the couple expressed their sincere affection and gratitude to each other, painting a picture of their future together. Now, in a small forest village in Sweden, a special yet ordinary family lives, created by a husband from America and a local wife along with their 3 children. The first and second daughters as sisters sometimes bicker, but also play with their neighborhood friends, naturally learning both Swedish and English. The youngest son is growing strong, beginning to babble mama and dada to his parents. Ethan and Linda, while living a busy and chaotic life of parenting, are grateful for each day. In spring, they light a bonfire and roast marshmallows. In summer, they ride a small boat on the nearby lake. In fall, they walk along the autumn-leafed forest paths. And in winter, they hang Christmas decorations and watch the aurora. They are no longer lonely. Sometimes his family in Chicago calls amazed. Are you really settling down in Sweden? Are the kids growing up well? To these questions, Ethan shows the smiling faces of his children on a video call and replies, "We're doing great. We'll all visit the States someday." Linda's curiosity about America has grown, and she and her husband sometimes plan a visit. They met on an unplanned journey. Their languages, cultures, and environments were different, but they nurtured the same feelings and built a family by leaning on each other. For the wife, it was her first time having a family. For the husband, settling abroad was unfamiliar, but as if by fate, they filled the empty spaces in each other's lives. The white snowfields and green forests of Sweden and the aurora that unfolds in the night sky have embraced their love. In the future, big and small problems will come their way. With 3 children, worries about parenting, education, and finances will be endless, and the scars from Linda's past or the cultural dissonance Ethan feels may not completely disappear. But they have learned. They have learned how to hold hands, talk, and solve problems one by one. They have learned that with faith and love for each other, they can overcome any difficulty. Even at this moment in their small red wooden house, filled with the sound of their children's laughter, they watch their daughters run around the yard and their infant son dreaming of tomorrow's happiness. And if the night deepens and the sky clears, the aurora might once again illuminate the quiet forest. Under that light, they will hold each other tight and whisper, "Thank you, I love you, and let's be together forever." Perhaps this story is not an end, but a true beginning. The beautiful tale created by 2 souls who met on opposite sides of the globe will continue there amidst the snowy fields under the starlit sky and with the sound of their children's laughter.